Now, here I am in Atlanta, or to be more precise, Newnham, the area of the city of Newnham in Georgia, at Larry Reid's home. And this is Larry Reid, a notable person whom I've met. I met really probably the first time at 1982, and we keep meeting at exquisite events around the world, mainly economically directed. But Larry's a guy I admire greatly, and we were both brought to what we loosely call the free market movement by a fellow called Leonard Read. Now I'm just going to ask for Larry's experiences on how he first got introduced to the free market and what made you alert to the potential of this way of thinking.
It's a long story. Have you got enough film?
There's plenty of battery.
Okay. Well, my family was not particularly interested in public affairs or political matters, but they had good instincts. My father was a small hardware store owner, so he knew what it meant to meet a payroll and pay taxes and deal with meddlesome government. So I think maybe he planted some seeds, gave me some instincts to question authority and to be independent, self-reliant. But it was in 1966, when I was not quite 13, that my mother said she was going to take me to Pittsburgh to see the movie The Sound of Music. I think it had been out for a few months already. And I didn't want to go because I saw it as, what is this? A bunch of people singing and dancing? Why would a 12-year-old want to go see that?
Sure.
But she told me it was a true story and that I should see it. And so I went, I guess, with a reasonably open mind. And I was captivated by the movie. And looking back on it, I think it was because it might have been the first time that I ever realized that other people in other parts of the world don't live quite like we do, that they live under various forms of tyranny. And so I loved the movie, loved the music to the movie, and it planted a seed that sprouted in the form of a desire to read everything I could get my hands on about pre-World War II Europe. Because I knew nothing about the Second World War and what led up to it, but I knew that that's the context in which the movie is best understood. So I started reading all that material, and my interest in liberty, sort of just percolated in the back of my mind until 1968. This would be 2 years after I saw the movie, when in Czechoslovakia, not Austria, where the movie was set, but rather right next door, a development known as Prague Spring began to take place. And it was making headlines all over the world. The Czech people, Czech government in particular, was trying to move in the direction of more freedom. And as the world watched that, I watched it too, as a 14-year-old. And the big question, of course, for weeks and weeks during Prague Spring and into the summer was whether or not the Soviets would invade. They had done so in Hungary in 1956 to put a stop to a liberation movement, and the question was, would they allow this to develop in Czechoslovakia undeterred? And I recall vividly in early August of '68 that Brezhnev of the Soviet Union went to Bratislava to meet with Alexander Dubček, the leader of the reform-minded Czech government. And at that conference, Brezhnev basically said, "Oh, we wouldn't invade. This is just rumors. We wouldn't do that." Well, then 3 weeks later, or less, I remember at about 10 o'clock in the evening Eastern Time, my father had just gone to bed, and I walked past the bedroom, and he said, "Hey, come here, come on in here," because he had the radio on next to his bed, and the first reports that we heard of the Warsaw Pact invasion of Czechoslovakia was taking place. And as a 14-year-old who had been cheering on the Czechs as they were pushing the frontiers of liberty within the communist world, I was outraged by this. And but what can you do at that age in Western Pennsylvania?
Oh, boy.
Well, luckily, within a few days, there was a little story in the local newspaper, the News Tribune, the Beaver Falls News Tribune, where I lived. And it said that a group called Young Americans for Freedom was going to have a demonstration in downtown Pittsburgh, about 30 miles away, to protest the Soviet invasion. And I immediately thought, I want to go to that. This is something I can do. So I went by bus, myself, up to Pittsburgh.
How old were you then?
14.
14?
Yeah. I was 1 month from my 15th birthday. And I joined in to the anti-Soviet demonstration in Mellon Square, downtown Pittsburgh. We burned a Soviet flag. And I joined Young Americans for Freedom. And as a new member of YAF, you received a package of materials at that time, including a subscription to the Freeman in your first copy, and Hayek's Road to Serfdom. I remember that was the one that I thought, boy, this is tough. This is difficult reading. I had to reread it a few years later. Also, Henry Hazlitt's Economics in One Lesson, and Bastiat's The Law, and Henry Grady Weaver's classic, The Mainspring of Human Progress. And the message was, if you want to be an anti-communist, it's not enough simply to oppose tanks in the streets. You have to know your philosophy, you have to know your economics. And so I dove into all that stuff and read all that I could, and that was just the beginning. And thereafter, that just infused in me a passion for liberty. So I got involved in this movement from an anti-communist angle, but the more I read, the more I learned, the more interested I became in economics and the moral philosophy of freedom. I read my first Freeman, must have been within a month of that demonstration in Pittsburgh, because I joined YAF right away, and been reading it ever since. I would not have thought it possible if somebody had told me at age 15, you'll be president of that outfit one of these days. But that's what's happened.
In charge of Freeman.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And so that's how I got started. And I should tell you another thing. You have enough battery power?
Sure.
Okay. I started a Young Americans for Freedom chapter at the high school level, at Beaver Falls High School. And then for college, I planned to go to the University of Pittsburgh. I was accepted, and I was planning as a senior in high school to start at Pitt in the fall of 1971. But Young Americans for Freedom had a convention in East Brunswick, New Jersey in March of '71. Now keep in mind, it's about 2.5 months before I was to graduate from high school, already accepted to go to Pitt starting in the fall. Well, one of the speakers at that YAF convention was a Grove City College economist and professor by the name of Hans Senholz. And of course I recognized the name because I'd read a couple things that he'd written in the Freeman, but I'd never heard him speak. And you knew him, Ron, so you know how mesmerizing he could be as a speaker. Well, I was just floored by his speech, and he and I talked about this years later because he remembered it well. I went right up to him after he was done speaking, and I said, Dr. Senholz, I'm going to graduate from high school in a couple months, but I've already been accepted to go to Pitt in the fall. I want to transfer as soon as I can from Pitt to Grove City. If I do that, are you still going to be there? Because I was afraid no sooner than I'd transfer, he'd be off some other college. And he said, no, I'll be here. And he was there another 25 years. Well, I started right away working the process to try to get transferred. And it ultimately happened. I only attended Pitt for 1 semester. And I transferred mid-year to Grove City, January of '72. And while I was at Pitt that 1 semester, I had an economics course, but I'd already read Rothbard and the Freeman, and so I was Austrian in my economics already. And I had a Keynesian professor, and I was constantly doing battle with him in class. I would say, what about this? What about that? And instead of answering most of my questions, he simply dismissed them. Like, oh, where are you getting that? I don't know why, where you got that. Why are you asking me that? And I thought that was incredibly stupid. for a professor to say to a student who's asking legitimate questions. I remember he was talking about the business cycle. And of course, typically giving the Keynesian explanation, you know, a collapse in demand and the government has to come in and make up the difference and spend more. And I had just read Rothbard's little mini book on the causes and cures of depressions. And I said to him, his name was Lim, Professor Lim, he was from Indonesia, as a matter of fact. I said, you say that it's the market that causes the depressions in our economy. But I understand from Dr. Rothbard that there are 3 features to every depression, every cycle, that require explanation. One is an inflation of money and credit that precedes the bust. Another is the fluctuations in capital goods industries that are much greater than those in consumer goods industries. And the third is the, what was the third? 3 features that Rothbard is noted for saying, you know, you don't have a decent cycle theory unless you account for all those things. A cluster of entrepreneurial errors that form the beginning of the collapse. I said, you haven't explained those. And Professor Lim just dismissed them. I don't know where you got that. I just thought, I'm not getting economics here. I'm getting I'm getting bumper stickers from a Keynesian. And I had a Marxist for a political science professor. And I was constantly battling with him. I think that gave me some good training, but I was so happy to get into Grove City College middle of my freshman year. And Dr. Senholtz and I became good lifelong friends. And of course, he was one of my predecessors as president of FEE. So you asked for a story and you got several.
There you are. You've followed Herr Senholtz as the president of FEE.
I had known him for years at that point. And in fact, when I got my graduate degree and started looking for a place to teach, I went back to him and I said, Hans, do you know of any colleges anywhere that might be interested in hiring a newly minted grad student who's ready to teach? And without skipping a beat, I think because he had just had some correspondence with Dr. Orville Watts at this place, he said, yes, Northwood Institute, Midland, Michigan. And I didn't know anything about it, never heard of it. But on his suggestion, I put my name in, and later the college was changed to Northwood University, which it is today. But I was accepted and I started teaching right away out of grad school. But if it hadn't been for Hans Senholtz recommending it, I probably would never have heard of Northwood, and I don't know where I would have started. But it would have had to have been a school that would not be unhappy with me teaching Austrian economics, because that was my mission.
Yeah. And FEE is now, the Foundation for Economic Education, to give it its full title, is known around the world as FEE. So it's become the trademark of the freedom movement, really, and it's left its trademark in every other think tank who have followed.
It sure has an enormous influence. When Ludwig von Mises found it so difficult to become established at a university in America because the academia was so dominated by Keynesians, FEE sort of took him under its wing and helped him get by as he was writing and establish himself at New York University, doing seminars, and will always be very proud of having done that at a time when Mises was really beginning to make a name for himself worldwide.
Well, Larry, thanks for those comments, and our very good wishes on your continued success for yourself and for FEE itself.
That's very kind of you, Ron. Thank you.
Thank you.
Same to you.
Thank you.